Okay. Well, look at that little repair job right at the end. Nothing but like a few technical glitches just to keep it honest right out of the gate. Hello, my name is Colin, and welcome to episode 10. Can you believe it already, guys? Episode 10
I
of Roll
can.
by
I can.
Rolls. I can. Of Roll by Rolls Tavern Talk, a show where we, the Roll by Roll gang, discuss various aspects of running a great D&D campaign based on our experiences with D&D 5e and our current adventures in Emathan homebrew campaign. So joining me tonight are the rest of the Roll by Roll crew. We have Barry, who plays Nightingale and Landis.
Hey, everybody, how's it going out there?
We have Egan, who plays Douglin and Lafferty.
Good evening.
And Max, who plays Kogon.
Hello, odd viewer who stumbles by once in a while.
Yes, exactly. Accidentally falls upon our channel. So, guys, recently we were talking about how you can keep things exciting and add variety in a role-play focused campaign. So basically a campaign that doesn't have a lot of a lot of combat or exploration, and doing that using non-combat challenges. So we thought that'd be a good topic to share with our viewer. One day it'll be plural. And so let's do that. So I thought maybe we would start off tonight's topic with maybe a little discussion around what do you mean when you say non-combat challenges? And I think I'll hand that off to the new guy to start tonight. Max, why don't you start us off? So what do we mean when we're talking about non-combat challenges?
Well, I mean, you can run a whole gamut of things, really. It can be anything from, in my opinion, anything from actual like skill challenge setups to just different types of interactions. And if it involves, you could boil it down to if it involves a dice roll of any sort, it's a type of challenge, right? Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up for me, I guess. Boils down to non-combat is everything else in D&D.
all of the other things. Egan, your thoughts on and I don't know if I've told you that your beard's looking fantastic. Oh, yeah, the only guy without one. I'll just have to keep talking about everybody else's beautiful beard. Anyway, Egan, your thoughts on non-combat challenges?
Yeah, it's I think as Max was saying, anything non-combat related. For me, it's about rolling the dice for things that aren't just about smashing and killing and stabbing. You mentioned skills challenges. There's perception checks. There's interactions and deception and persuasion. There's even crafting. These are all things that you put in front of a character to see if they can overcome or achieve or get an end result that in essence is dice roll related. I guess that's how I would look at it. And the thing I like about it most is also you can, I think we've said it in other episodes, dusting off some of those skills that aren't used that often, which I love because it really helps round out a character instead of just, oh, I got a high perception and I got a high deception and that's all you ever use. So, yeah.
Like, when do you ever use animal handling?
It's so rare. It's very rare.
Yeah, it's good to get, to use everything. And if you're not proficient, then hey, you gotta sweat a little bit, see if you can get it done. So I like it.
Barry, last but not least, your thoughts?
So I've got it's in parallel to this, but I think there's some key elements to a game that will have a lot of non-combat challenges that are important to acknowledge. So you're going to need strong or the will to have strong role play from your group. And you're going to need a really good NPC dialogue to help carry those non-combat challenges. Because in a combat, it's the combat that's carrying that whole challenge, right? It's the whole system is based up on that around D&D with all the dice rolls, the weapons, the abilities, all of that stuff. So if you want to move away from that, you're going to need dialogue in the game to help carry all of these other challenges. Along with that, you're going to need world building and non-combat descriptive uses. So when someone comes into a room, you're going to have to describe it a little more. You're going to have to add details that are important to those challenges to help draw away from just, needing to fight something to figuring out the mystery that's going to be all. So a lot of this is DM focused because in essence, it's going to be the DM who's creating these challenges. So with these tools and these things I'm mentioning here, it shouldn't be a problem. Having a good grip on non-combat mechanics. What skill is related to what challenge you're trying to do is very important. If you're running along on rooftops, what skill checks can you incorporate to bring that into the realm of reality and a mechanic that you can use in the game so that you can get those dice rolling and get that element of chaos brought into the game. And then moving away from the kill the monster to get experience points to moving to a milestone system really helps bring these other challenges into the game that can really, create depth to your game. And it gets rid of the murder hobos because murdering people doesn't give you experience points, so they'll be less likely to do it. So those are just some of my thoughts that come out when we're trying to really describe what we're talking about here tonight. Some of the key elements I thought were important to mention.
Yeah, so I think generally speaking, when you're talking about non-combat challenges, you're talking about anything that requires character skills, like you were referring to there, Barry. It could also be player skill challenges. So there are people that do non-combat challenges that are really around your player skill, and I'll talk about from our session later on, that's partially player skill to figure out the puzzle, the challenge that's in front of them, and then you can also lean a little bit on your character skill when, as we sometimes say, my character is way smarter than the player, right? So, and then the last sort of that falls in there is non-combat encounters. So, when you encounter something, but that encounter is not about a fight, it's about a discussion, a situation, or whatever you could get into. I threw together a little list here, just in general, some of the non-combat types of challenges. And Barry, this gets back to what you were talking about. They tend to lean more on role play and skills. So things like riddles, puzzles, difficult travel due to the weather, navigation obstacles, crafting traps, political and social problems, mysteries, survival. It's a lot of things that people are probably already doing in their campaigns and don't realize, it sort of has a title as a non-combat challenge. And they may not look for other types of non-combat challenges. So my next question, and I'll just go right back to Max on this one. So Max, how do you make the most of non-combat challenges in a campaign? And not just, not in just a session, but how do you really make the most of them within your campaign?
I think you need to have a willingness to create aspects of your character from a player's perspective anyways, of embracing just what you think fleshes out the interesting and fun parts of your character. So, taking some of those spells, for example, that you never read about in guides because they're not the best in a fight, but you just like, this is cool, and my character would totally have this spell. And then being and same with various skills and proficiencies. Like there's a lot of tool proficiencies that almost never come up, and that's where you're kind of incumbent on your DM to embrace this idea as well. There's some feats in there as well. And then you just have to start really being creative as a player to sort of as the DM's describing whatever is before you, don't be so linearly focused on what's the direct objective and how's the best way to solve it. Sometimes you just got to have fun with it. You know what I mean? And be like, you know what? I think my character is going to use grasping vines to grab the chandelier and pull it down and start a fiasco at this ballroom. You know what I mean? Whatever, maybe it's around some sort of like heist or something like that. You know what I mean? Just whatever, just kind of thinking outside the box, allowing yourself to get a little crazy sometimes. And you know, obviously your DM has to be a bit willing to just roll with it and, you know, kind of cater what will work and what won't absolutely be. It's too off the charts. But yeah, I think it really just boils down to kind of being a little more creative and thinking outside the box. So.
Good way to wrap it up. Think outside that box.
Yeah. Outside the square circle.
Yeah.
Outside the dodecahedron.
Egan, your thoughts?
Well, I could not agree more with Max. I think that it is a willingness of the character to embrace what his PC or her PC is. You know, I think also skill challenges and non-combat related solutions or challenges separates D&D from video games, because video games, it's linear, as Max was saying. See the thing, and there might even be a puzzle, but at the end of the day, it is very, straightforward. This is the challenge. You try to set it up, and I think, as you mentioned, Max, the DM has to embrace that, right? Pulling down a chandelier is not a normal thing. So how does the DM handle that? You know, and the good ones like we've got will roll with it and say, oh yeah, fantastic. All right, roll the dice. All right, you need to do a strength check, and then this character needs to do a dexterity check. Otherwise, it's going to get crushed under, and make up the damage. Right? I'm sure there's a rule somewhere, but who cares? Let's just see how this plays out. So yeah, it's again, I think all of this just really fulfills and fleshes out characters, like who they are, how they are. You mentioned picking a feat that maybe isn't the most powerful, but it fits who your character is or what their background is. I will say one of the things that they might do with the new version is your background basically dictates a lot of your feats, and I think like your background says who you are, and I think we do a lot of that already in how we play our characters. But yes, embraced characters going for things out of the box, and a DM willing to roll with it to make it all kind of mesh together is a lot of fun. Again, doing stuff that is not just, all right, Eldritch Blast, Eldritch Blast,
Pew, pew,
Eldritch Blast.
pew, pew.
Yeah. Hey, there's a time for that, and we love kicking butt, but sometimes it's also fun to talk somebody into something, or talk them out of something, or create something that solves a problem.
Barry?
So I'm going to draw straight from the Adventures of Emathan campaign that we're having. One of the biggest challenges our group has faced so far was an item creation challenge. We had to create the sickle of the harvest moon so that Anton could start producing the ale and wine again. Now that has nothing to do with combat. That was our DM setting up, Colin, you setting up several different spots we had to hit, different challenges we had to make. We had to do some investigation. We had to find our way to places. We had to, talk our way through situations. So, it touched on several of our characters' different strengths and weaknesses. And it was a really fun challenge. And it's a challenge that can be stretched over one session, 2 sessions, over a longer period. If you're doing, say, you're creating an artifact. Well, now you guys got to, get the toenail clippings from Baba Yaga and all of this. You just make it as creative as you want. But I think also something to consider that I don't know if a lot of players and DMs are using now, but when you fail a skill challenge, it's not a complete failure.
Right.
Create within your table a scaling system that will make the immediate fail not the end of that situation. Because, think about it in a stealth challenge. You're sneaking through a keep and you fail a stealth check. It doesn't mean you've alerted everybody to your presence. It just means maybe the immediate guard is suspicious and starts looking around. Now you've got to make a hide check. So doing things like that will make non-combat challenges super exciting, because it's not a make or break situation. We've all been in those situations where you cast a spell, the creature saves and nothing happens, and you're just like, that's so stupid. Don't do that with skill challenges. If you have a skill challenge, make it a scale of failure. So, they first check, they fail. Okay, you're down to this level. You've alerted some things. You can still make it out of this situation. You've just got to maybe be creative a little bit. So create some type of tiered system in your skill checks, and it will make every skill challenge that much more exciting, and it builds the drama when you're down to that last final check and you're like, oh my God, everybody's rooting for you because there's been this level of failure happening that makes it exciting, instead of just you either make it or you don't, and that's the end of the challenge. Like, boo. That's terrible. But like some of the other ideas, Colin, that you were listing, that I have a list as well. Doing research, doing an acquisition challenge where you got to try to get something in whatever way, creative way your players can think of. Investigation, tailing somebody, diplomacy and political challenges. If you've got characters that have really high deception, persuasion, those are the perfect kind of challenges to use for that kind of a group. Chases, where it's all skill check. Like I said, the rooftop chase is a really great one. Infiltration is another really great challenge. Insertion, where you got to plant an item on somebody. Courier, carrying a message. Might not be any conflict, but you can't let that message get taken over by somebody else. The sky's the limit when you can come up with challenges based on skills. Like, look at the skill list, figure out some challenges that you can create using those skills. Like, say you've got a skill, the animal handling skill. You've got to capture the prince's horse, and it doesn't like you. Well, if you have the animal handling skill, you might be able to calm it down. Like, the sky's the limit to what you can create. Use the skill list as a template for what should be put into your challenges, and your players will love it.
Yeah, so I'm going to touch on a couple of things you guys said. So the first one related to a campaign itself. So if you have a group that decides that your campaign is sort of going to really embrace non-combat challenges, that's an important discussion point, right? You've got to have that conversation before the campaign starts, as part of your session 0, because that can really change the way a character build goes together. And I know, Barry, you and Max really touched on that. You may want to look at those abilities that are more around wisdom, intelligence, if combat is not as big a thing. Maybe now strength and dexterity aren't as going to be as important as maybe a good wisdom and intelligence. So you've got perception and investigation and stuff like that. And then you want to look at some of those feats, the ones that, if you have a very combat driven campaign, you may look at some of the feats and say, why would you use any of this? But I mean, in a campaign where non-combat challenges are a regularity, those feats may really come to the forefront over, some of the other more combat related feats, right? And then, Barry, sort of just adding on to what you were talking about, I think it's really important for a DM to make sure that when you are integrating non-combat challenges into your campaign, make sure they have a fail forward. You don't want them to be a go or no go challenge, right? So
Different levels of success.
Yeah, and I think I do that as a DM, and I know it's not rules as written. It's kind of a homebrewed way to deal with all ability checks. I don't look at it as you made it or you didn't make it. So if you have a DC 10 on a skill check and you get a 9, you just about did it. So that to me, that's different than if you rolled a 2. And if you rolled an 11, means you just barely did it. To me, that's different than if you rolled a 19. So I tend to describe what happened on a sliding scale based on the DC a little bit. Because like you said, I think that adds a little more excitement. Like, yeah, I got that natural 20. Yeah, I mean, there's no critical for an ability check, but that means you really did really good, with your bonuses. So maybe I'll flavor that a little more than I would have if you got an 11 or a 10 and just barely made it. That will change the way I describe how that plays out. Next question. Experiences with non-combat challenges. Anything that really jumps out that you can think about from your D&D careers of some sort? Max?
Well, I can say from a DM perspective, when I started throwing in encounters that were non-combat related, and they could be anything from like with NPCs or just encounters with nature or environment, things like that. Something I did was I stopped coming up with what the solution would be.
Yeah.
And when I stopped doing that, I just focused more on environment hazards, what they're seeing, what they're feeling, and just rolled with what they came up with. And that just, I think when you can do that, you're not subconsciously giving hints on how it should be done, and you're not almost directing them to the path that they should take, and you'll get a lot of interesting sort of plans and actions that they come up with to try to succeed, right?
That's a really good point.
And then I would say, just to play a little bit of devil's advocate, that it's okay if they fail something, but just don't make it that, maybe don't necessarily make it that first roll that is the fail. You know what I mean? Unless some guy's trying to swing over a chasm and they lose their grip and they're falling, that guy's failing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But that makes interesting responses from the rest of your players too, right? So
yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I agree for sure. You don't want to just be like ended on one single roll, but it's a little off topic, I suppose. But having some form of failure exist makes things worth winning. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
But yeah.
And when I use the term fail forward, what I mean by that is, so if you succeed on that challenge, maybe what you're trying to do is easier than if you failed. Now you got to go the long, hard way around to get to the end goal, but you don't want to stop the players from being able to achieve what they were going after. It just becomes a lot harder now because you're failing these challenges, right?
Sure.
Egan, experiences with non-combat challenges?
Yeah, so a couple recently, and then I'll end it also to a little devil's advocate. One was with a couple, well, with Barry for sure, is I ran a chase basically, and sort of the rules by it that you cannot use the same skill as the person right before you. You can't also use the same skill twice as an individual. If so, the DC gets harder or disadvantage. I had a sort of a sliding scale of the DC based also on creativity. And you guys mentioned the fail forward. That's really what it was. They weren't going to fail. They were just going to have to fight a lot more gnolls at the end of this if they weren't able to achieve what they did. But what I love most about it was how it allowed these guys and girls to get creative about things, right? I shoot an arrow. Okay, well, maybe, I think Barry or I tie a rope around this arrow and I shoot it against a tree, and then I keep the other end and then I shoot it against another tree, and that creates this, tightrope so people ran into it. I mean, it was just so much fun getting the creativity out of them. And, you want to reward that stuff. And then another one I did was, it was sort of a riddles. And the way I did it was, there were tiers, like out of 10, let's say if this I was playing with this girl and it was like I got 3 right, okay, well, her reward would be rather modest. But if she got 5 or 6 right, then her reward at the end of it, she had an encounter with a fae that just wanted to entertain himself for an afternoon, and she wasn't going to get killed. The combat that was in it was basically just sort of more of a in her mind, if you will. And then she did really well, and she got a really cool magic item at the end of it. So, tiering the reward, like, for example, we want to loot the body. Okay, make a investigation. Well, a 10 is going to get you 50 gold. 15 is going to get you 100 gold. A 20 is going to get you a Vorpal blade. So that's another skill challenge, if you will, that there's a direct reward for it. So they don't lose, they just get a lot cooler stuff if they get a higher roll. And then sort of, devil's advocate to piggyback off what Max said is when not to make a character roll the dice.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we can,
Overroll.
I listen to some podcasts and
Yeah.
I'm going to climb up a ladder should not need a roll, right? You shouldn't need a skill challenge to walk up the stairs or to, see something like you walk up to the door and there should be some things that are just sort of given. And I mean, Colin, you do great, but there's some podcasts I listen to where like they're rolling for everything. It's like, come on, it's just, some things don't need that. So
Yeah, I
talk about.
Yeah, I kind of, I've subscribed to the thought process that if there's a reasonable chance of failure, and that failure, would have some sort of cost, if you're going to climb up a 6-foot ladder, chances are it's pretty good. If you're going to climb up 100-foot rickety ladder, okay,
Sure.
now we need a roll, because if you fall at the 90-foot level, I mean, there's obviously consequences to that, right? So
Well,
you got to look at it that way. Is there, I'm going to try and jump across this 1-foot gap,
Right.
well, okay, you should pretty well be able to do that, right?
Well, for example, like, and this is where it goes, like you're going to loot a body. There's a dead body that has 2 pockets. I'm going to check its pockets. Now you're going to roll not to be able to get into the pocket, because you can do that, but what do you find? That makes sense. But as you said, jumping over a 1-foot puddle,
Yeah.
I think you can do it. Let's just move on and go from there.
Yeah.
They're called challenges.
Yes,
Challenges.
exactly.
I will say though, just to heighten the emphasis on player creativity, if a character says, I check the pockets, well, that's fine. Maybe you don't need a roll. But if they say, I go through the cadaver's clothing and I'm checking out, you know what I mean? Like looking for hidden compartments in their robes, things like that, then maybe you have a sliding scale roll or something like that. But you're doing that now, you're rewarding the player's creativity to, be more involved and be more descriptive. And
and now there's a reasonable chance they will miss something, because it's a lot.
Do we draw the line at cavity search? I'm just asking.
Just asking.
dead bodies don't say no.
What is it? A prison wallet, Barry?
Well, Barry, on that note, your thoughts on experiences with non-combat challenges?
Okay, personal experience with Nightingale and the interrogation that we went through.
Yeah, that was
so
That was awesome.
Nightingale was in the process of interrogating a guy, and I think I can't remember, but I may have rolled poorly on an interrogation. Like I tried to intimidate him, and I don't think it really was working. So I took a completely different avenue with it and tried deception. I was pretending I was someone else in disguise. And I was like, showing him that, because Nightingale always wears disguise. So I was showing, because I was Corey Fairbanks at the time, that I had a fake nose and fake hair. And I played it that way. My character is built around deception and, subterfuge and all of this kind of stuff. So I generally will play him that way. So, Colin rolled with it and I was pretending to be a guy. And then the next challenge was how to get this guy across the courtyard at the vineyard without being detected. So I was like, oh, I'll use minor illusion, and I'll put an illusion of Douglin over top of him, and I'll pretend to be consoling him so I can control his movements a bit. And you were just, you were operating on the rule of cool, which is something you generally do. If a player comes up with something creative, figure out a way to turn it into a dice roll and go with it. Like let the player go with it. If they come up with creative, like Max, like you're saying, if they come up with really creative solutions,
reward that.
Reward them. Let it work, because they're pushing the boundaries and they're having a great time. And I think something that we're all kind of touching on that is important to acknowledge to our viewer is reward creativity by creating the challenge that the players want. So what basically what I'm trying to say is, if your players are coming up with something, make it possible, and you will begin to nurture that habit in your players. If you shut down ideas like, oh no, that's not possible, you're gonna make your players shut down that creativity element and just be like, okay, I'm just gonna go by the skills. I can either climb, or I can athletics, or I can strength something, instead of being like, well, I can't strength something, so can I come up with a clever way to use acrobatics maybe? And I think, Colin, we do that with, again, Nightingale with his whip.
Yep.
When I'm doing grapple. Thank you. Yep. Grapple somebody. They're using a strength check. I'm using acrobatics. So I'm, pinning myself against something, or, using their momentum to help keep them grappled, because I can't win in a strength check. But you're allowing me to come up with a creative way that my player would. Like, I know I'm not a strong character, so he would have ways to combat strength with agility. When you pull me, I leap past you so that the whip stays coiled around you, and I still got you. It's an athletics check. So just be really creative and really open with possibility, and you can watch the game and the creativity just expand and expand and expand. It can get pretty exciting, and that's my personal experiences. I'm trying to relate it back to Emathan, and even with Landis, like when you're doing research and things like this, the DM can make that a challenge. Like it's super easy to make it like, okay, we'll do a skill check to see if you pick up on the certain thing in this book that you're looking for, or you just breeze past it. And maybe Landis has to do a persuasion check with the librarian that he's kind of getting the hots for, and building a relationship to let him into a certain room that he can't. So you can change it to anything. So yeah, that's my personal experiences in this campaign. Last campaign, even the between players, as an example, making non-combat exciting can happen between players, and building that rapport between characters. The relationship between Flint Battlehammer and Egan, your burden, right? That relationship started off rough, but we would role play it out, and that was a challenge to between us, to how to figure out how to make this a realistic relationship growth, without just being like, we've met in a tavern and 3.5 days later we're besties. Like that doesn't work. Like you got be willing to create a little friction for a while in your group, because that's just naturally what happened. So that right there is a whole other realm of possibility for non-combat challenges and adding excitement. It's just between characters. Like, don't have your teammates be best pals right away. Maybe the paladin looks down at the rogue and thinks what they're doing is wrong, and the rogue's always feeling like he has to justify what he's doing, and vice versa. The rogue is always watching the paladin. If they ever do something that they don't feel is on the right path, he's going to mention it. That right there is it's a kind of challenge in the group itself. So there's lots and lots of ways to do it. That's my personal. I'm going to end there.
For me, I'll touch briefly. In our last session, we had the Landis had to use the crystal cube and the key to gain access into one of his grandfather's chambers.
Thanks, Colgan.
So that there, I looked to utilize both a riddle and a puzzle. So I gave you a bit of a riddle that gave you clues as to how to solve that puzzle. And it's a situation that I think is common, where it's a mix of player skill and character skills when the players fall short. So you players were coming up with the solution, but when you struggled, you did a bit of a perception check, figured out one little piece, and then the players actually figured out the rest of the puzzle. And I think that's a very good way for a DM to kind of give the players a get out of jail free card when they get stuck. It's like, make this skill check for me. And you're able to give them a little bump in the right direction to get through that, right? So,
Nightingale's way more charming than I am, so I have to roll a lot.
yeah, all of our viewer will just need to go back and watch the session to learn all about that. So as we kind of wrap it up here, I just want to mention there are tons of fantastic resources online. I'm sure all of us were viewing them in sort of preparation for this session. If you're doing any sort of Google searching, basically look for D&D skill challenges and D&D non-combat encounters. Is pretty much the two keywords that are going to get you where you are there. I took a quick look through DM's Guild. They've got tons of fantastic resources as well. One that really jumped out for me was called Encounterpedia. It has 450 non-combat random encounters and 100 skill challenges. And reading through that, it was fantastic. You know, I often say, even if you're not going to use these directly, they are fantastic fuel for the imagination machine, right? Just get your mind going on that stuff there. So as we wrap up, final thoughts on our topic of the night, Max?
Yes, my final thought is that if you do run an XP-based game, just give some of these things an XP value, and then you'll encourage your players to embrace some of this stuff. You know, there's nothing, just because it doesn't involve a monster, you know, it's not a video game. So a monster doesn't magically contain XP within it that you have to unlock by carving open its chest, right? It's
aren't green little globes of energy going to move towards me after?
You know, it's the challenge that they experienced. So if you just apply that mentality to everything, everything meaningful, you know what I mean? You shouldn't just be slapping your characters every which way with experience necessarily, but like, you know, anything that has some serious, meaningful experience behind it, just that's what you give experience points to. So
that's a really good point. Really good
into your non-combat stuff, and you'll see your players embrace it a lot more.
Yep, I like that. That's an important part, because DMs who maybe are more experienced with combat heavier campaigns may not even think about the fact that you should be rewarding experience for your group completing non-combat encounters and challenges. Egan, your thoughts?
I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say,
roll a skill check,
that play role-playing games love to roll the dice. And you cannot always have a 4-hour combat. So any excuse to let folks roll the dice and see where fate takes them, to me, is a positive. So get them rolling.
Yep, I would agree. Barry, thoughts?
Final thoughts on just be open, be creative. It takes time in a group to nurture this kind of play. We have played for multiple years now, and it's progressed into this style of game where we've had to come up with creative ways. Like, Colin will have to randomly give us cash because we have rare combats and don't kill a lot of things. So it's hard to get him to buy money.
And half the time forget to loot.
But, you know, like, combat's a part of the game, so don't shy away from it. It sometimes it has to happen. It does create a level of excitement, but there are so many other opportunities for you to allow your players to try out interesting feats in interesting ways. And
Yeah.
remember, the rule books are a set of guidelines. It's not the last will and testament that we have to follow. Use them to help create continuity, but again, siding on the rule of cool. If it sounds incredible, just roll with it, right, Egan?
Yeah.
Just roll with it. Yeah. My final thoughts. Really, I'm just gonna reiterate what I talked about. You know, if you're a DM that wants to lean heavier into non-combat challenges, just have the conversation with your party and understand where they're at and what that looks like. The sooner in a campaign you can do that, the better opportunity you give your players to do character builds that are going to enjoy this type of play more. You know, if you're role play heavy and you're going to have skill checks around you know, arcana and history
Religion.
and nature and religion and investigation and persuasion and all the intelligence and wisdom skills. You know, if you're a player who's thinking this is a combat show, you're leaning into constitution and dexterity and strength, and you know, it's important to be on the right page when you do your character build around there. Well, gents, 43 minutes. Boy, we don't have a hard time flapping our gums, do we? So we'll make that a wrap for episode 10 of Roll by Roll's Tavern Talk. So we hope that our viewer has enjoyed tonight's topic. Tavern Talks occur the Thursday after each of our Saturday night Adventures in Emathan session. Our next session is scheduled for December 10th. And for those of you watching on YouTube, please support us by making sure you like our videos and subscribe to the channel. If you hit that little bell icon, you'll be alerted anytime we do a session. So to end, as we often do, we'll offer a cheers to our viewing audience. So thanks for joining us in the tavern, and we hope you can join us next time. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.